Alright, so in this exercise we're going to be learning a little bit about layers, selections, adding colors, layer masks, importing graphics, bitmaps, and layer effects. So we have our layer palette open. That's the only panel that we'll have open, and I'm going to just slowly shut these layers down so that you can see a little bit about what I'm talking about here. The topmost layer is a bitmap, and I'm about to hide that layer by clicking on the eyeball. You can see now that I have a mask, which is in the shape of a dove, and applied to that mask or that dove, I have two effects. The next thing I have is a sun, which is that little yellow thing in the middle. I'm going to close that out, and then I have this area of dark at the top of my screen, and if I click on this I can disable the layer mask and you can see the color that goes into that, and then of course if I hide this you can see the other color that makes up this combined color. There we go. So those are the layers that we are going to be working with, and that leaves me down here at this bottom layer, which is my circle. The circle is the bitmap. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to swap my documents, and I'm going to now go through the process of building what we just saw. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tools up here to extract out my background graphic, which is this circle. This is in the background. This is just basically a bitmap. It's a black spot on a white field, and they are flattened. They're one object together. So I really need to get one out of the other to make it work. So to do that, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to use the quick selection tool. And when I come out with the quick selection tool, I can change the size of my quick selection tool, and I can click and I can drag. Oh, you know what? I always do this. I got to remember to get on the right layer. You got to always be on the right layer. I was on the dove layer. That's why it wanted to, even though the layer was hidden, it still wanted to select that dove layer. So I want to get on the background layer. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to click and drag over top of my circle. And now you can see the dancing ants. That means essentially that the circle has been selected. It's ready to be extracted. So what I generally do when I do something like this is I go up to the select menu and I check refine edge real quick. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to display my refining of the edges on layers, which will now show me, since I have no other layer showing, the background, which is essentially transparent. That's what I'm looking to see. And it actually looks pretty good. I could clean this up by moving these settings a little bit, but this is going to end up being blurred anyway. So I don't care that it isn't 100% sharp and crisp out here. I'm going to accept it the way it is. I'm going to hit OK. That brings me back to how it looked originally, because it is simply a selection, and it's up to me to take that selection and turn that selection into something else. What I think I'm going to do with this right now, leave the selection active, and I'm going to come down to my layers panel, and I'm going to click a new layer. And I've created my new layer right above my background layer. And I'm going to rename this. I double click that, and I'm going to rename this Sun. Okay, so I've renamed that layer Sun, and I'm going to hide the background layer. All you're seeing on the sun layer is the selection because there's nothing there yet. So now to color this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to double click on my foreground color. And I have my color picker. And I can change the hue here using the hue slider. I can change the saturation along this axis, and I can change the brightness along that. So it's hue, saturation, and brightness. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the hue to something like a golden yellow color for the sun. And I guess I want it to be full bright yellow. So I make sure that my saturation is in the upper corner here. And notice that the current color, which is the default color, has switched to this yellow color. That's about what I want, so I'm going to hit OK. And now remember, I'm on the sun layer. I'm going to come over here with my paint bucket tool, and it's right there. If you see this, the gradient, then you know your paint bucket tool is hidden right behind the gradient. So I'm going to come in, click, and now I have my gold on that layer. I'm going to go select, deselect, and that part of it's done. I'm going to get the move tool, and I can now move this image on that layer wherever I want. There is the first part of this, the creation of my sun. Alright? So the next thing I want to do is I want to put a sky in here, and the sky is going to be two different colors. That means I'm going to need two layers. I'm going to do this one at a time so that you can actually see how this works, and it's a lot easier that way to deal with one issue at a time. Create a new layer right above the sun layer. Now the thing is, I really want the sun layer to be in front of layer 1, so I deliberately did this so that you could see that the layer stacking order is going to be wherever you place the layer, it's going to end up being there. What I want to do is I want to make this a blue sky, so once again I'm going to call this, there's going to be two layers of sky, so I'm going to call this sky SKY1, okay, and come to the foreground color again, and I'm going to use my hue to drag me up to find myself a nice blue that I want, and I think I want this blue to be a little bit desaturated. I want it to be a little bit delicate, so I'm going to drag it down to about there, and there is a good color for that sky, I think. So you see what I did is I dragged the hue and I also dragged the saturation, and then I'm going to hit OK. I am going to get my paint bucket tool. I'm going to hide the sun layer for a second, and then I'm going to click the entire frame with no selection, and it's going to fill the entire frame. Now watch when I bring the sun back. Boom, there's the sun. You don't see it because the sun layer is on a layer lower than the sky layer. That's really what I want to show you, is that you have to have your layers in the proper order in order for them to show the way you want. So I'm going to fix that by clicking on this and dragging this up one layer, and now I have my sun in front of my sky. So I'm going to build the second part of the sky. In order to do that, I want the second part of the sky to be in front of sky 1. So instead of having the sun selected, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click on sky 1. And then I'm going to come down and click on new layer. And now I have a layer right above sky 1. This is exactly what I want. Remember, the layer stacking order is important for you to think about. I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to call this sky 2, SKY 2. I have sky 2, I have sky 1. So far, so good. What I'm going to do is select sky 2. I'm going to hide the sun. I will hide sky, well, I could leave this because I don't think it'll really matter all that much. I got sky 2. I'm going to come down here now once again, and I'm going to set the foreground color. This time the foreground color is going to be a much darker version of a blue. I want something a little bit darker. That's probably a little bit darker, and maybe just for the sake of showing you how this works, I'm going to drag this down and I'm going to adjust the brightness. I'm going to even darken that blue much more like that. I'm overdoing this, but I'm trying to show you the hue, the saturation, and the brightness. Click OK. Now I have that layer selected. That's the important thing. And I'm going to get my paint bucket tool again, and I'm going to come and click. Bingo, there you go. I got sky 1 and sky 2. There they are. Okay? So we're moving along really good. Let me bring the sun forward again. And I'm on sky 2. Now the trick is to make sky 2 blend into sky 1. I'm going to do that by using a layer mask. Layer mask is located right down here. I'm going to click on that layer mask, and if you take a look at that layer, which is the dark blue layer, now suddenly I have linked to it a layer mask. And what I want to do with this is I want to use a gradient on this. So I'm going to get the gradient tool, and up here in your properties bar along the top, you'll see that you have a bunch of different gradients here. I believe the gradient that I'm looking for is that guy right there. We'll find out in a second if I'm right or not. So I'm going to click on that one, and then I'm going to come over here, make sure that layer is selected and that layer mask is selected. I'm going to come down to the bottom of my visible area, hold the shift key down, and I'm going to drag up to about that point. it worked, but it's the wrong direction. So what I do in this case is I click at the top, hold down the shift key, and drag down to about here. There you go. That's exactly what I want my sky to look like. There is your first layer mask. We're moving along really good with this. This is working out just fine. This is basically what we want this thing to look like. Let me switch back so you can quickly see. I'll apply all this stuff and you can see where we are. See, we're fairly close to this. So the next step is, before we finish the dove up, what I want to do is I want to go in and I want to show you how I turn the sun into the glowing mask that it really is. So I select the sun layer, I go up to the filter layer, and I go down to blur. And I come down and I look for Gaussian blur. There are different types of blur. Gaussian blur is the one that I want. Choose that, and then I'm going to drag this over until this is your slider. This gives you the radius of the blur, the amount of the blur. And as you see, as I drag this over, it's beginning to blur out. And I think 38.7 is a little bit too much, so I'm going to back it off a little tiny bit. That I kind of like. So we're at 26.4. Remember, you can make this thing blur as much as you want or as little as you want. You know what I mean? You could come back and do that if you want. It's whatever you decide you think looks right for your particular composition. I'm happy with it going in this direction like that. That actually I like. So I'm going to hit OK on that, and now that's done. So this entire thing is finished with the exception of my dove. There's two things that I need to do with my dove. There is my dove, by the way. My dove right now is just a black silhouette, which is kind of boring. I want this thing to look a little bit Salvador Dali-ish. So what I thought I would do is I would put a sky into the dove. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the File menu, and I'm going to go Place. Right there in my folder, you'll see that there's this image called Sky. And I'm going to click that, and I'm going to then hit Place. And what that does is it brings sky in, but unfortunately it brings the sky in below the dove, which is not what I want to make my mask. I'm going to click on the sky, and I'm going to bring that up above. Well, actually what I have to do first is, since it's in there, you see how it's scalable? I can scale this if I want. I don't really need to scale it because you can see the dove is covering the entire thing. So all I need to do to get this thing placed completely is click the Move tool, and then I get this little message telling me, do you want to place this? And of course I do. I'm going to hit Place, and now it's in there. I want the sky to be above the dove. Go back to the original and take a look. See where the sky is? It's actually above the dove. Okay? So we're going to go back to my dove. I'm going to take the sky, which is, by the way, just so that you know, this is a smart object. You can tell by the little graphic in the lower corner it's a smart object. And it's okay that it's a smart object in this particular case. But I'm going to drag that up above the dove. So now I have this sky and I have this dove below it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a technique which is going to make this layer, the dove layer, into a mask. And what's going to happen is wherever there's clear space, you're not going to see the sky. And wherever there's black, you will see the sky. So the dove shape will become the sky by virtue of that little graphic turning the sky into a mask. I'm going to come up, and between the two layers, I'm going to hold my Alt key. I think yours is your Option key if you're on a Mac, but mine is an Alt key. I'm on a PC, and I'm going to click right there. Bingo! Look at that. Now we have our, I'm going to hide the sun so that you can even see it better. Well, actually you can't. But you can see that it is now the sky. The dove is now turned into the sky. We're almost done with this. But there's one more thing that I want to show you that's very interesting, and that is that I can actually apply some effects to my mask, and I can give my mask a greater looking shape than this. So I'm going to select the dove, and then I'm going to come down to my effects at the bottom of my layer, and I'm going to add a layer style by clicking that. And there's two styles that I'm going to put on this. One is Bevel and Emboss, and the other is Inner Glow. And I can pretty much do that at the same time if I want. So how I'm going to do that, I'm going to click on Bevel and Emboss. There's my Bevel and Emboss dialog box. Now I have some settings that I've used for my other one. I am going to apply those settings. You can come in and you can play around with these settings all you want. But the bottom line is that you decide and you get used to this. There's a bunch of different settings. The first one that I'm looking for here is the style, which is inner bevel, and that is correct. The second one, the technique, is chisel hard. That's the one that I chose. And I set it to a depth of, believe it or not, 704. So I'm going to actually type in 704, and it comes up pretty substantially. The direction I'm going to leave is up. The size I'm going to set to 18. Let's see if I can get 18. There you go. There's 18. Soften, I'm going to make soften all the way up to 10. So now you see I get this really nice shape that really begins to look like a dove shape. I'm really happy with this. The angle I'm going to change ever so slightly to 127. It's a subtle change, but I think it makes it look better. And the altitude, instead of 30, I'm going to set that to 37. See, again, you can see subtle changes taking place, and that's the whole point. I want you to see that you can actually get these settings for it. Now, as far as the highlighting is concerned, in this case, all I want to do is I want to set the opacity. And I have it set right now to 75. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the opacity down to 44. And I'm going to make it a little bit softer. I think that looks a lot better. And as far as the white is concerned, instead of 75, I'm going to make the white 57. And there you go. That one is done. It looks really nice to me, at least. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to come down here and I want to choose Inner Glow. To choose another style, this style is essentially done, and it's going to stay because the check mark records it. Come down to Inner Glow, click on Inner Glow, and now the Inner Glow is being applied already. But I'm going to change the settings ever so slightly. I'm going to change the blend mode from screen to normal. Screen is a way of overlaying the colors, whereas normal is more or less like painting over top of them with color. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. The first thing after that I'm going to do is come over to the color, and I'm going to change the color of this. And I'm going to use down here because this is the easier way to do it. This is the hexadecimal number. And I'm going to change that number to 4457A7. And you can see that that's kind of like a bluish color, and I'm going to hit OK. So what that did essentially, instead of giving you a glow, it actually darkened the edges ever so slightly. The technique that I'm going to use is softer, which it is softer. The choke I'm going to set to 0. The opacity I'm going to change to, let's see where we at here. Opacity I'm going to change to 36, right here, 36. And then I'm going to move down to the size. The size is going to be 6. I actually am pretty close to that already. And the range I'm going to change to 14, right about like that. And that's it. Hit OK. And if you take a look here, what's really nice about this is you have your effects. There is your dove layer. There are your effects. You can hide these effects by just simply clicking the eyeball, or you can hide all the effects by clicking that. And there is your flying dove exercise. Give it a try.